Hi all, a new day and new stories from Ocean Story. Just listen to this story. My wife's father is constantly trying to interfere in my affairs. This annoys me to no end, but I try not to be rude to him. My wife Bella is asking me to be discreet and not spoil my relationship with her dad, Asher. It's not about Asher asking me how I'm doing and what I'm doing on Saturday. This man wants to know literally everything when we meet. I don't think there is a single secret that Asher doesn't want to know about, but this is not the only thing that annoys me about Asher's character. My wife's dad is one of those people who would rather say something than not say anything. Asher loves to make jokes, and very often these jokes are very stupid and would have been laughed at in the year 1200. I'm not used to it at all, and every time I have to pretend that everything is cool and that Asher is the coolest person I know. For these reasons, my brother did not want to come to my house for Christmas when I told him that Asher would also be with his wife. Sometimes it is a mystery to me how Asher's wife tolerates him at all. A few weeks before we were supposed to celebrate Christmas, Bella and I went to visit her parents. To be honest, from the first second I crossed the threshold of the Asher house, I wanted to leave as soon as possible. It's like when you come to a job you hate with all your heart. I feel something similar when I come to the Asher house. My wife promised me that she would give me a few days off from work if I was quiet today. I thought I had enough strength to endure one dinner with Asher for a few days of rest. As soon as we entered the living room, my wife's mother called her into the kitchen. I was left alone with Asher. Not even a minute later, Asher jokingly asked me, "Did the wind blow you and Bella here? Or did the smell bring you here?" I was just confused and answered, "My car brought us here." Asher laughed and started asking a bunch of questions. Eventually, it got to the point where Asher started asking me about all the diseases I had and why I was afraid to swim in the ocean. You know, for me these are sensitive questions that I don't answer to anyone. Asher was a little upset when I refused to answer his questions. Asher even asked me how long I sit in the restroom on average and how many times a day I go there. I sat and prayed that our dinner would start soon, and then Bella and I left. Dinner passed with 1,000 jokes from Bella's dad, and I was very uncomfortable hearing the details of Asher and his wife Claire's sex life. As we were driving home with my wife, I started to say that I didn't want to be with her dad for Christmas. Bella started saying that I was being too nice to her dad. My wife thinks I can't understand her dad, so I think he's strange. But really, how can you like it when a stranger asks you about your health? I realize that Asher is part of the family. Still, for me, such questions are not normal, because there was one time when I told Asher that I was very sick and my mom put some liquid stuff on me. Because of this, I was very rash and my body turned a little green. Asher told this story when we were having a family dinner. It was a bit embarrassing to hear and very unpleasant. Then some relatives started asking me about this disease and whether they could get it. After that incident, my trust and respect for Asher dropped to zero. I perceive every joke Asher makes critically and with condemnation. Bella says that everyone makes mistakes and has the right to be corrected. I completely agree with her. Everyone has a chance to make amends, but not if that chance has been ruined several times. Bella is trying to make me love her family. Despite the fact that I told her how I feel, it was hard for me to agree to be at the Christmas celebration, but I agreed for the sake of my wife and came with her. This year, surprisingly, a lot of relatives came and the holiday was great. The only thing I was thinking about all evening, how would Asher not start telling his stupid jokes? 2 hours later, I heard the first joke from Asher, and everyone laughed. I realized that it was about to start. I looked at my wife, but she shook her head, letting me know that we were not going anywhere. I sat at the table for a while, but I couldn't stand it. When Asher started making jokes about his brother's children, Asher said that they looked like a giraffe and a zebra, and started comparing which one was more sturdy and which one was clumsy. All the family members were having a lot of fun, but I noticed that the children were feeling very embarrassed and wanted to fall underground. I asked Asher to stop his silly comparisons and leave the children alone. He looked at me and asked me to relax. I told him in front of all the relatives that Asher's behavior was very bad and he was taking too much liberties, and everyone else listens to this shit with delight. My wife looked at me with a furious look. I went to the car and wanted to drive away. My wife caught up with me and started scolding me for breaking my promise and telling on her dad. Bella knew perfectly well that I had been justified in yelling, but she didn't like that I did it in front of all the guests and made her dad look bad. After all, my words made Asher look like a fool. My mom said the next day that she was very ashamed of my behavior. My dad supported her and said, "Son, even though Asher didn't behave well, you should have talked to him alone." My wife has been angry with me for days. I feel like a bastard for snapping and ruining the holiday for many relatives. Nathan, I am so sorry you have a son-in-law like that. The actions of your wife's father, Asher, described in this story are deeply disturbing and unacceptable. His constant interference in your personal life, health, and even intimate details is a violation of boundaries and basic respect. However, it is important to be patient with family members. There are boundaries that everyone should respect. Asher's behavior, interfering in your personal affairs, making offensive jokes. He even shares sensitive stories without his wife's permission. It shows a lack of respect for other people's feelings. Such behavior not only creates discomfort, it also demonstrates a disregard for other people's personal space. Your wife's father needs to learn some manners, because with this kind of behavior, he will not be respected. Thomas, man, your wife refuses to see anything bad in her father at all. It's cool that Bella loves her dad, but she's a little blind and doesn't want to accept the facts. The situation with the children is especially surprising. Humor is a powerful tool, but it should never be used to humiliate or offend others, especially in the family circle. Jokes about appearance and humiliating comparisons of children. They show a lack of maturity and emotional intelligence. It is disappointing to see that Asher's behavior was not only not controlled by other family members, it was also perceived as fun. Such actions can leave deep emotional scars on children and create an uncomfortable atmosphere for all participants in a family event. If I were the parents of those children, I would ask them to stop such stupid comparisons because I do not consider it normal. A story that really surprised me. I started dating a guy who was friends with my brother. Leo is very well-mannered and cultured. I was attracted to him because he was unlike any of my ex-boyfriends. Leo was into sports and had a great sense of humor. Leo also has a negative attitude towards cigarettes and alcohol. I can't say I have a problem with that, but once a month I could buy myself a low-alcohol beer and drink it at home. I decided not to tell my boyfriend of 5 months about it. Leo and I are still in the early stages of our relationship, and I know very well that we need to take a step forward. Since Leo and I were holding hands at most while walking, I could say that Leo is not in a hurry to share tactile moments. I really like that, but it's a little strange and unusual. Only last week, Leo hugged me for the first time when we said goodbye and he walked me home. Not long ago, my mom invited Leo and me to her house. She wanted to know more about my boyfriend. Also, my brother was very happy to be at the dinner, to spend some time with his old friend. I thought my mom's idea was great, so on Wednesday Leo and I went over. My sister Skylar was also able to come to the family dinner. We had a nice conversation all evening, until Leo started to tell us a little more about himself. Skylar heard that my boyfriend didn't respect cigarettes and said that she personally smoked. Although she knows it is very harmful, she is addicted. Leo sympathized with my sister and gave her some advice on how to get rid of the addiction. Skylar was happy to hear the advice from my boyfriend, although in reality, she was hardly going to quit smoking. Skylar asked my boyfriend, "How do you feel about my sister drinking alcohol sometimes?" Leo looked at me in surprise. I almost choked on my salad. When I heard my sister's question, Leo asked me, "Do you really drink?" I was at a family dinner and everyone knew that I could drink sometimes, so there was no point in lying and I had to admit the truth. Leo decided not to pursue the topic at dinner, but I knew very well that I would have to explain everything to him. After dinner, I went outside with Leo to discuss it. Leo asked me, "When were you going to tell me about your addiction?" I explained to him that I am not addicted. I sometimes want to drink a beer without a lot of alcohol. Leo said he didn't want to break up with me, but because I hid such an important detail from him. Leo's trust in me has dropped significantly. Leo also said that his family is very judgmental about bad habits. Finally, Leo said, "I need a few days to think about it." Then I will tell you if we will continue to meet. I am very angry with my sister for her big mouth. Skylar is always messing things up, but now it was more than ever. Even though she says it's my fault for not telling my boyfriend about my love for beer. Am I really a disgusting girl for hiding this fact from Leo? Isaiah, can you even think ahead? Because your decision to hide it from Leo is a very bad one. That you occasionally drink low-alcohol beer for 5 months shows not only a lack of transparency, it also shows a lack of respect for his values and beliefs. By hiding this information, you have jeopardized trust, which should exist between partners. Your sister's words were able to highlight this problem, but the responsibility lies with you. Because you didn't address it earlier, Leo's frustration is justified. Because your actions have called into question your honesty and your willingness to share important aspects of your life with your boyfriend. How could you not tell him about your drinking habits? In such a short time, go to a bar and find a guy to drink with. Lucy, Leo's aversion to cigarettes and alcohol. It should have been a frank conversation, especially when you knew that you have a tendency to drink low-alcohol beer. By choosing to keep it a secret, you undermined Leo's trust in you, and you showed a lack of consideration for his feelings. Your boyfriend asked a good question. How long were you going to hide your addiction to beer from him? I guess, if not going to dinner with your family. Leo hasn't known for a long time that you don't lead a healthy lifestyle. Do you like lying to the person who loves you? I'm sure you've talked about it, but you couldn't find the strength to do it, to tell Leo about your bad habit. It's not your sister's fault, she just made it happen. The fault is yours alone and you need to admit it. I find it very funny that you blame your sister, because blaming your sister Skylar for the situation is a shirking of responsibility. It's a direct evasion of responsibility. Although Skylar's question at family dinner did lead to a revelation, the global problem lies in your decision to hide your thirst for beer from Leo. Asking your sister could have brought this issue to light, but your choice to hide it shows a lack of maturity in dealing with such situations. It is very important to take responsibility for your actions and consequences instead of shifting the blame to someone else. Grow up and stop being a child. It's not appropriate for an adult like you. My next story. This year, my son finally started living separately from my husband and me. Christopher moved out because he finally married Leah. They did not live together before because my son wanted to live with his wife only, not just a girlfriend. But the story is not about my son's values. Christopher has loved watching cartoons since childhood and has a large collection of magazines and comics. Christopher lived in a separate room from his brother, so he had a lot of space to keep his magazines. My husband and I never opposed our son's interests. The only thing we demanded from Christopher was that he not have comics everywhere in his room. My son took most of his magazines and belongings from his parents' house. It was a blessing for me. I could finally put some exercise equipment in Christopher's room. My son's wife is not a bad girl and I liked her. Leah had been dating my son for about 2 years and had gained a good reputation in our family. A few days ago, I got a call from Christopher. Our conversation was very standard at first and limited to questions about each other's lives. At one point, my son fell silent and said in a very quiet, frustrated voice, "Leah did it." I didn't understand what she meant, so I started asking my son questions. Christopher began his story. My girlfriend turned out to be an outspoken perfectionist. I kept my journals in a separate room, where sometimes Leah and I could spend time alone. Last Saturday, Leah came to me and told me to get rid of that junk. Leah was referring to my junk, my magazines and comics. I also bought a few suits a year ago that were still in boxes. The room wasn't cluttered, but most of the space was taken up by boxes and cabinets of magazines. A discussion started between Leah and I defended the importance of my comics. But despite all my arguments, Leah didn't think that a pile of picture magazines belonged in our small apartment. I explained to her that most of my magazines have been around for over 12 years, so I can't let you get rid of them. Leah said they were just silly memories that kept them sitting in the room. I was very disappointed with Leah's attitude towards my comics. Leah has never said anything against them before. Even when she came to my room, Leah would express her admiration, so now I can't understand what happened to her. For the next few days, Leah explicitly told me to remove my comics from our apartment. I stood firm and refused her. We had several arguments about my comics. I told my wife Our bathroom is full of your cosmetics. It makes me uncomfortable and it's very difficult to wash my face without touching anything. But out of respect, I never tell you to throw away your old products because I know there are many bottles you don't use. Leah started to say that I was very wrong and comparing completely different things. I was really annoyed that Leah didn't want to admit her own mistakes, but blamed me for the magazines. On Thursday, I came back from my brother's house and noticed that Leah had quickly carried a package to our second car. I asked her what she was doing. Leah replied, "Nothing important, honey." I became a little suspicious of Leah's behavior. When I entered the apartment, I passed by the room where my magazines were. I noticed that one of the comics was lying right in front of the door. I went into the room and saw that none of my boxes were there. I looked around thoroughly for the next 10 minutes. Eventually, it became clear that Leah had gotten rid of the magazines without my consent. At that moment, I felt nothing but that my own wife had betrayed my feelings. I ran outside, but Leah was gone. 2 hours later, she returned. I started asking her where she had gone and where my magazines had gone. Leah said, "I'm tired of waiting for you to throw the magazines away." So I took them to the shelter and gave them to the local director. I was shocked by Leah's actions. I started yelling at her and said, "You had no right to do that to my stuff." Leah replied, "I have been asking you to do this for a long time. You could have avoided losing the comics if you had put them away yourself. We had a big fight, and I don't want to talk to Leah anymore." For a few days, I ignore Leah and sleep separately from her. I supported my son and told him that he shouldn't be so upset. He can always buy himself some comics. I'm curious what other people have to say about Leah. I think she acted very selfishly and shouldn't have thrown away my son's things. Hazel, instead of discussing her concerns and seeking a compromise, she took it upon herself to throw away something that had sentimental value to your son. I have never shared that opinion. If you are husband and wife, you can do anything with other people's things. Leah is a very selfish person who only thinks about her own feelings. Maybe keeping a lot of comics within a small apartment is really problematic, but that doesn't give anyone in the family the right to do their own thing with their partner's stuff. Imagine if your son saved money in one of the magazines. It would be a shame to lose the money just because someone thought that his feelings of comfort were much more important than the magazines that he had been saving for years. I think it's a very cruel thing for Leah to do. No one should touch someone else's stuff without asking. Andrew, my wife, has a lot in common with Leah. She always wants to get rid of my fishing gear. My wife argues that I haven't gone fishing in 5 years, and my stuff takes up too much space. Obviously, both parties had strong convictions, but the way the situation was handled could have been better controlled. Instead of resorting to unilateral action, your wife could have thought about how to keep things but increase the space. I don't think it was difficult to sit down and talk calmly together. Leah thought she was doing a good thing, but in reality, her actions were centered on her own feelings. It's really disgusting that your wife doesn't think that these things are not just magazines with pictures. They must be really valuable to you if you are so protective of them. Considering that your son kept the magazines for years, maybe some of them could be considered rare and valuable. Violet, your wife should have kept her hands off your stuff. In protest, you could have given Leah's makeup to other girls he didn't know. For example, you could go out on the street and just hand out cosmetics to everyone. I'm pretty sure Leah started yelling at her husband and accusing him of being selfish and stupid. But what's the difference between throwing away cosmetics or magazines if they are both strangers to each other? Leah's logic is very strange and has unclear intentions. Now I want to tell a different story. I am a father of 4 children and have a wife whom I divorced. Aurora and I have joint custody of the children, but I take care of most of the children's expenses because Aurora doesn't have much money. My new wife Savannah loves children and has always dreamed of a big family. I have a very good income because I work as a lawyer and am very successful in my field. Moreover, my wife Savannah also works and has some money. Savannah has enough time to be with my children. We split the custody of the children with Aurora on a weekly basis. It is not very convenient to take care of all the children at the same time when sometimes they live separately from you. Eventually, over the past 2 years, we have been adapting to this. My ex-wife Aurora found a new boyfriend, Theodore. I can say that our children have full families, so it's not so bad. My Aunt Audrey is very fond of all my children and often invites them to her house. Every summer my children go to Audrey's for all their vacations. The children have great conditions, which I also grew up in my time. My aunt has 2 children's rooms and can accommodate my children. I have 2 sons and 2 daughters. The children sleep with whomever they want. Without any division, girls sleep together and boys sleep separately. This year is no exception, and my kids are going to go to Audrey for the holidays. Although lately Aurora has been against such trips, despite her words, the children were happy to go to their grandmother's house. I don't think it's to their detriment, as Aurora says. During the period when my children went to Audrey, my sister Brooklyn brought her 2 children to her. Brooklyn's children are a little different from mine in their behavior, because her children are a little bit older than mine. When my ex-fiancé found out about it, Aurora started to protest and told me to bring all the children back home, which of course I was not going to do. I was able to assure Aurora that there would be nothing wrong with our children not being alone. Aurora really doesn't like the way Brooklyn raises children. My ex believes that children should be taught good things, not allowed to do whatever they want, as my sister does. I partially agree with Aurora, but the whole situation is not as acute as it seems. Brooklyn allows her daughter and son to play on their phones without time limits. In my ex's opinion, this is a big mistake. There are a few other small points in which Aurora condemns my sister. 2 weeks after I took the kids to my aunt's house, my ex started asking me about the kids every day. Even though Aurora had Audrey's number, I told her that I would be at Audrey's one of these days and could tell her everything in detail later. A few days later, I finally got to my aunt's house. The children slept wherever they wanted and ate whatever my aunt gave them. There were no specific problems, except that the children broke 2 windows while playing with a ball. But my aunt got used to it and didn't scold them. I told Aurora about everything, but she didn't like the fact that the Brooklyn kids were sleeping next to ours. She started scolding me for allowing it. I explained to her that the children were still young. There was nothing wrong with them sleeping together, because children spend all their time next to each other. Brooklyn was also at my aunt's house at that time. Aurora started telling me to take the children away from the other children, or at least make sure that our children slept separately from Brooklyn's children. Also, my ex started threatening me if I didn't. Then she would come and take the children. I didn't lie to Aurora and refused her requests. Her hysteria became very strong, and Aurora started accusing me of that I was helping to raise our children to be thieves and very naughty children, meaning how she thinks my sister's children are growing up. I hung up the phone and did not listen to that nonsense. Instead, Aurora went to court a few days later and wanted to deprive me of custody. Aurora also began to slander me on social media. My whole family said that Aurora was crazy and was too worried about the children. I disagree with Aurora's opinion and think she is very wrong. Am I a bad parent for mixing my children with my sister's children? Caleb, it's not hard to agree that your ex-wife thinks too much of the children, and the fact that she's super concerned about that your kids are spending time with their cousins reflects the complexities of blended families and the inability to solve such situations. Instead of resorting to threats and lawsuits, the driving force should be open communication, which in turn could give better results. Allowing your children to communicate with cousins is not a negative thing. Your wife shouldn't think the Brooklyn kids are bad, unless she has a reason to do so. Have you ever tried to think about why your ex treats Brooklyn kids so badly? Maybe there really is something to believe that the kids are evil and have a bad influence on your children. I understand that you don't want to think your sister's children are bad, but you should be sure that they are adequate. Ryan, I partially understand your ex-wife. There's nothing wrong with making sure your kids don't turn out to be shit. It's a shame that the disagreement with Aurora turned into threats and lawsuits. A more constructive approach would have been if all parties had engaged in calm and open discussions to understand each other's perspectives. Perhaps your sister could prove to Aurora that her children are sane. Then Aurora would have no doubts and would not say that Brooklyn children are disgusting and inadequate. I find it a bit strange that Aurora considers it bad behavior when other people's children play on the phone for 20 minutes longer than her children. I don't know how to react to this story, but it's pretty clear that some of your family members have no respect for other people, which of course causes quarrels and disagreements. Next story. My mother decided to leave my 2 brothers and me when I was 15 and my youngest was 9. My childhood was not easy, and I did not feel complete enough when my mother left our family. 2 years after my mom left, my dad found a girl named Paisley who was about his age. My brothers and I were devastated when our mom decided to leave. In fact, she always cared about us and tried to give us good things. But because of some of her own feelings for another man, she decided to leave and not have a relationship with our family. My dad tried to give my brothers and me all his attention when he was free from work. Of course, it was not enough, but I am glad that my father did not forget about us. His girlfriend also supported us and became a good stepmother. I don't have any special feelings for her or anything like that, but I'm glad that Paisley came into my life. A few times I even told her about a girl I liked at school. I didn't dare to tell my mom that. As time went on, we often changed our place of residence because our family income was not high and the rent for housing was sometimes too high. My dad's sister had a vacant house that she did not live in. My dad arranged with Everly for our family to live in her house. We paid about $8 a month. It wasn't very expensive compared to the apartment we were living in before. It turned out that Everly was a very kind woman and agreed to take us in at a rent of $300 a month. My dad was happy because we now had a little more money. During this time, my mom settled down nicely with her new family and married Charles. They had 2 children and my mom became their stepmother. Our family was almost never together with my mother's family. The only exceptions were big family holidays. My grandfather always invited my dad and my mom to his birthday party. Only for one holiday did my mother come with her family. At the same time, none of my brothers spoke to her or her children. Sometimes I feel like they are complete strangers to me. Once my mother tried to establish contact with us, but it didn't work out and our conversation was very awful. Since then, I have talked to my mother no more than 3 times in several years. A little more time passed and my brothers and I settled into our college dorms. My dad and Paisley and my younger brother were still living in Everly. She never sought to profit from us, so she gave us permission to stay as long as we wanted in her house. My family will always be indebted to Everly. 6 months after I started university, my dad told me that Everly died because of liver disease. As it turned out, Everly had been sick for a long time, but she hadn't told anyone about it. She had no husband and lived alone. Sometimes her daughter came to visit her. My dad always called Everly, but never went to see her. That's why Everly managed to keep her secret from us. I was very sad and came to my aunt's funeral. After the whole ceremony, a notary came up to me and told me what I had. I was a little surprised because I didn't know about anything. Everly left me the house where we lived for the last 6 years, and Everly also divided $600,000 between my family and her daughter. I didn't have much joy because I lost an important person, but the money was not superfluous. Thanks to it, I could finish my studies and save it for my small business. Over time, all the plans became a little more realistic. A month has passed since my aunt died. My mother, who hadn't been in touch with me for several years, called me. She offered to meet me and discuss some things. When we met, she explained that one of her sons was sick and the other would be entering college next year, so she needed money for that. She knew that my share was $130,000. I was very surprised by my mom's request. I didn't agree to it right away because all these years she did not give a damn about my life or the life of my family. Only when I had more money did she become interested in my life. My mom started begging me right there in the cafe. I felt a little uncomfortable with all the attention, so I gave her $5,000 to leave her alone. However, she started to panic that it would not be enough and I should give her another $20,000. I refused her and said that this was out of line. You didn't come to me for years and didn't ask how I was doing. But when I became profitable for you, you came to me. I won't be your sponsor, goodbye. My mom was very angry and came to my dad's house for several weeks demanding money. Later we found out that she had lied about one of her sons being ill. My mom's goal was to get easy money, which she had nothing to do with. My dad told her, if you show up at my house again, I'll call the cops and lock you up. I will call the cops and they will take you away. Some of the relatives condemned our family for being rude. But were we really supposed to believe my mom's lies and to give her money for every reason? I think I did not do wrong when I refused her in the cafe. After all, she is my mother and she should have come to me last. Josia, I don't think your situation is very standard. It's absolutely disgusting and painful to hear about a mother who abandoned her own children when they needed her the most. She left her family with young children, especially when you were going through the difficulties of growing up. It is especially terrible that your mother left your family because she found a new family. I don't think she had any good reason to do that. Usually partners leave each other because of critical circumstances. We don't know what was driving your mom at the time, but the fact that her decision affected the lives of everyone you know is undoubtedly a fact. Your dad is a great guy because he didn't get depressed. Although in such cases, it is impossible to be happy and feel joy. Your brothers had a mom and a dad. It doesn't really matter that your mom wasn't their own. The most important thing is that your family was complete. Anna is shocked and outraged that a mother, after years of neglect, had the audacity to ask her child for financial assistance. It is clear that her sudden interest in your life was dictated solely by greed, using your children as a means to get money without any remorse or intention to reconnect. It is a serious betrayal of the role that parents should play in their children's lives. I think you should cut your mom out of your life. How many times did she help you or your brothers? I doubt she ever cared about you. If her husband has a job and has taken care of her family for so many years, then why did she decide to outrage you and ask for money? It's very frustrating when your family members see you as a victim and an opportunity to make money off of you.